Right. But that's all I'm going to say about that for now, because we've got a lot to do today. We are in the midst of the season of nonviolence right now, and if you're not aware of what that is, it's when we celebrate the lives of Dr. Martin Luther King and Gandhi and what they did in the world through their practice of nonviolence. And so that's going to be sort of encompassing what we do today. The main thought that we're going to work on today, though, is called love in the jury box. So a couple months ago, I received that dreaded envelope that says jury duty on the front of it. And I went through the typical thing that I do when I get a jury envelope. I go, on one hand, that, I really don't want to engage in the energies of judgment and blame and punishment because those aren't really great energies for me to play around with. But at the same time, if I were innocent until proven guilty, I would want me on my jury. And I certainly can't lie to get out of this, right? So I've done this every single time that I've received this jury envelope and had this little kerfuffle. Well, this time I decided to do something a little different. I looked around at my spiritual practice and where I'm working in my own life to grow and learn and be more adept at my practices. And I looked around at jury duty and thought, there's not a whole lot of love present in jury duty. There's really probably not anybody consciously practicing loving when they get called in. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend every bit of this time that I can consciously, intentionally bringing love to everything that I do and see how that changes the experience. And friends, it was pretty miraculous. And so what I want to do today is I want to share that experience with you, highlighting along the way the different ways that we can engage in a loving practice, to start where it's easy and then build some richness into it and finally getting to where we're practicing unconditional loving. And this is really appropriate for the season of nonviolence because loving and a spiritual practice of loving is so key to practicing nonviolence, to being able to stand in a nonviolent way. And so I want to start with two quotes, one from Gandhi and one from King. We'll share those just briefly. We'll come back to those at the end. And so just allow these to have their way within your consciousness. The one from Dr. King you've already heard, I'm sure. It's one of his more popular quotes, and it's a very powerful one. I'll share just the tail end of it. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And from Gandhi, when I despair, I remember that all through history, the ways of truth and love have always won. Is there any place in life that you're despairing a little bit these days? Any place that it's easy to find despair? Well, remember, the ways of truth and love have always won all throughout history. So let's dig into a practice of loving so that we can help bring that loving to the areas in our lives where we perceive hate, where we perceive despair, to make a change for ourselves and for the world. So, love in the jury box. I get called in, I go down, it's the very first day early in the morning. I walk into the jury room, there's several hundred people there. None of them want to be there, of course. And I start practicing what I like to refer to as impersonal loving or existence level of loving. It's where you simply love somebody because they exist. It doesn't require anything more than that. It's easy to practice with people you don't know because you have no history with them, so there's no judgments to deal with or blind yourself to. But really, this is based on unity basic principle number one. There is only one presence and one power active as the universe and as my life, God, the good, omnipotence. Basically, God is all there is. So if God is all there is, then God is the thing expressing as every single person. So I can love somebody simply because they exist, meaning that God itself thought that they were valuable and chose to express as them. So it's not that I'm loving the person, it's not that I'm dealing with necessarily their personality or the way that they show up in the world. I'm loving that essence in the center of their being, that loving essence, that living light of love, that Christ presence, whatever term you want to use, that is the same in all of us. And so I walked into the jury room and I began to do this. I started looking around at every person individually, seeing that presence of love as them and saying, I love you, saying that inside to myself, not out loud. I love you, I love you. That would have made it a very different experience. And as I began to go around the room, sending intentionally this loving energy from my heart to the heart of everybody else, those concerns that I had when I first got the letter popped back up. I don't want to engage in judgment. I don't want to do punishment stuff. I don't want to do blame. I don't want to do any of that. And because I was in this spiritual practice of loving, the still small voice within was so easy for me to hear when it said, I serve at the pleasure of Spirit. And so I heard that and I stopped and I thought about it. What does that mean, that I serve at the pleasure of Spirit? Well, once again, unity basic principle number 1. God is all there is. So if God were to, in the midst of that jury room, somehow suddenly manifest in front of me and say, "Ben, will you serve?" I would say, yeah, absolutely. I don't care what the case is. It doesn't matter what it's about. If you want me to serve, I will serve. Absolutely, I serve at the pleasure of Spirit. Well, if God is all there is, and a computer program randomly selected me to come down to jury duty, and then that computer program later randomly selects me with 50 other people to be a potential juror, and then through the process of voir dire, which is where the attorneys ask the questions to make sure you're a good juror, if through all of that process they determine that I'm good for that jury, if God is all there is that not God asking me to serve? And if I would say yes anyway, what's there to worry about? Because here's what I believe about God. I believe that Spirit knows me intimately. I believe it knows exactly what energies I do and do not want to participate with. I believe it is a loving presence, so it's not going to throw me somewhere where I don't want to be. I believe it also knows, in its infinite wisdom, where my growing edge is. And it knows right where to put me so that I can have the most amazing growth possible. And if I am put in a circumstance where I have to deal with the energies of blame and judgment and punishment, it's because there is growth for me to have there, and it will benefit me in the long run. Yeah. So what would happen, friends, if we were to bring that to our everyday lives? If we were to bring that practice of impersonal loving, of loving the kindness within everybody, loving that presence of Spirit within everybody, and then saying, I serve at the pleasure of Spirit, recognizing that wherever we are, there is something for us to do, something for us to learn, some way for us to grow, to give our light where it's needed. How would that change your life if you lived that every second of every day? It'd be pretty grace-filled, wouldn't it? It'd be pretty amazing. So we can practice in this way. We can begin to look at people as the loving essence of Spirit. We can love from that connected place of I am God and you are God and God is all there is. And isn't this amazing that we get to exist? And we can practice serving at the pleasure of Spirit. So once I had this realization, 2 things happened very quickly. 1, the majority of that concern around entering into punishment energies and all of that completely dissipated. And I got very clear that I was about to be put on a jury. And no kidding, not 10 minutes later, the court person comes up and reads a list of 45 names and I'm on it. And so I go into the courtroom with 45 other people to see who the right and perfect people are to serve on this jury. And so now I got to practice the second aspect of loving. See, we start with this very basic, easy, I love you simply because you exist, which is a beautiful and wonderful way to love. But what you'll find is that it's kind of generic. The way it feels when I love Stan from that way, the way it feels when I love Carl from that way, or where I love Sherry from that way, or where I love Dawn from that way, that is all uniform. I'm loving the essence of Spirit that is there. I'm not necessarily loving all of your personality quirks and all of the ways that you show up individually. So it's a lovely experience, but it's kind of neutral and it's kind of bland and it's kind of generic. So then we get into direct loving, or a personal level of loving. And when we were in this process in the courtroom where the attorneys were asking questions, I was able to practice that more deeply. See, in that practice, I look at the way you show up. I look at the way maybe the corner of your mouth turns up when you smile. That's a little different than everybody else. And I find all of those uniquenesses about the way you express your divinity. And I let those expand my experience of loving. I let them bring the color and the flavor to the loving that I have on that basic level. And it becomes more rich, it becomes more inviting, it becomes more unique and more engaging. Maybe it's the way you turn a phrase, maybe it's the way that you dress. That's a unique style just to you. Whatever it is, we look for those unique things. And we pay attention to how our experience of that existence level of loving changes when we add that uniqueness. And so now we had lawyers asking questions, so I was able to do that. I was able to watch how the lawyers spoke, and we had jurors answering those questions, raising hands, sharing stories, and so I got to see how each person was different and how they individually expressed their divinity. And I practiced loving in that way, seeing how my experience grew and expanded and became more rich. And an interesting thing happened. Whenever you serve on jury duty, if you haven't yet, congratulations. And if you have, you will hear at some point in the process the judge talk about what an honor it is to serve, how it's a really unique thing, blah, blah, blah. They say it all the time, and I'd never paid attention to it. But this time, because I was in that practice of loving, I actually heard what the judge said. And any vestiges that I had of concern about judgment and punishment and all of that vanished in an experience of community that was completely unexpected. It was no longer about right and wrong, about who did this and who didn't do that. It was rather two individuals who had tried to solve an issue. They had an issue, they tried to solve it, they couldn't do it. And they came to the community asking for help. And here the community was coming together with the intention of listening, really listening to what they had to say, hearing their experience, listening to what they had to share, presenting everything, taking it all in from a neutral place. Because we weren't part of the disagreement, we didn't have all of that negative energy around it, so we could take a step back and we could really listen, really hear, really evaluate what was going on to help in service, in loving service, at least one of us, fix their problem. And it was really inspiring. I was very surprised at how inspiring it was, and it reminded me of a story that I'd heard. You've probably heard it as well, about a tribe in southern Africa. Now, this story was shared by Wayne Dyer in one of his presentations. It was also related to Peace Pilgrim, if you're familiar with her, and was originally published in the book Contact, The First 4 Minutes by Leonard Zunin. Now, in all honesty, before we go into that in my research, I did find that there may be some factual inaccuracies about this story. So we're not going to say it's the gospel truth. But I think it is a really great example of community. And this is what was inspired in me by practicing loving in the jury box. In the Babemba tribe of southern Africa, when a person acts irresponsibly or unjustly, he is placed in the center of the village, alone and unfettered. All work ceases, and every man, woman, and child in the village gathers in a large circle around the accused individual. Then, each person in the tribe speaks to the accused, one at a time, each recalling all the good things the person in the center of the circle has done in their entire lifetime. Every incident, every experience that can be recalled with any detail and accuracy is recounted. All of his positive attributes, good deeds, strengths, and kindnesses are recited at length, carefully, and in detail. The tribal ceremony often lasts for several days. At the end, the circle is broken and a joyous celebration takes place as the person is symbolically and literally welcomed back into the tribe. What would it be like to be a part of that community? And the amazing thing to me was, here I was, in a community of people who didn't want to be there. Nobody wanted to be there. They would be anywhere else if they could. And just me practicing loving brought me a flavor of what that community would be like. And remember, friends, that's how that community acts when something has gone wrong. Imagine how joyful and loving it is when everything is going right. And if I can get a sense of that level of community love and community connection in a group that doesn't want to be there just because me, one person, is practicing loving, imagine what we can create here, friends, when every one of us wants to be here, if we all show up in that spiritual practice of loving, seeing the loving essence in every single person, adding the uniqueness of their own quality to it, and then asking ourselves, from the vision of this community, can you get a vision of what that community would be like? Can it engender a feeling in you of what it might be like to go to that community every day? To be a part of that, to share in that society, in that circle? If we hold that vision, friends, if we get a feeling in our bodies for what it would be like to be a part of that community, show up here in our loving practice, asking what's mine to do to create this community for myself and everybody, imagine what we'll do here. When I show up in that consciousness saying, how can I help Jenny who does everything and needs help? How can I give today? How can I volunteer today? How can I go to this person over in the community center who seems to be alone or needing somebody to talk to and go share loving with them? Imagine what we can create. Friends, the Board of Trustees has a big vision for this place. We know that this is a beacon, that this is an innovative center in the movement, and that through the work that we do together, we will not only grow this community for ourselves, but for the surrounding society, that people will be coming in saying, how did you do that? How did you create a community that's so loving and connected and engaged? And we'll tell them, We showed up in loving, friends. Because hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And so we practiced love. We held a vision for the community that we want, and we showed up to it to create it. I had a sense of that community. And I wasn't even practicing unconditional loving yet. So let's get to unconditional loving. So once we got to actually hear the case, I was selected for the jury, by the way. Once we got to, surprise, surprise, right? Once we actually got to hear the case, now I got to practice unconditional loving, because now I had the, oh, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. I had all of that contention. I had the lawyers who were asking questions in certain ways and that maybe were not very kind, and I got to sit there and see all of that and practice loving regardless. Seeing the whole spectrum, seeing this impersonal level of loving that we started at the beginning. We don't see any thoughts, feelings, beliefs, or actions from anybody else. We don't look at their personal stuff. We just look at the divinity that they are. But when we practice unconditional loving, we got to see all of it and love regardless. And so here I was face to face with all of it, right? And I'm practicing unconditional loving to the very best of my ability. And that's the key in practicing loving on any level, is to allow it to be to the very best of our ability. Because friends, we're going to fail. And oh boy, did I fail, especially with one lawyer. This guy, I'm still working on forgiving and practicing. But regardless, I was in that practice, right? I was doing my best to love regardless of what was happening. And so the entire case is presented, and we have our opportunity to deliberate. Now, this had been a very long day, and it was also a civil case. So there's a difference in civil and criminal cases. In a criminal case, you have to have all 12 jurors agree on the verdict. But in a civil case, you only have to have 9, and you can move on. You don't have to have unanimity. And so we get the case to deliberate, and this was during the ice storm week a couple weeks ago. So in order to not delay the case, they were pushing us through really long days. We had been there for 9 hours by the point that we were given the case to deliberate. So everybody was tired, and everybody wanted to go home. We had 3 claims. Each claim had 5 to 7 standards underneath it. In order for the person who was bringing the claim to win their claim, we had to agree on all of those standards, that they met that. And so to help make the process easier, I directed us into just doing a quick poll to see where we were on all of the standards, to see, we might already be unified on everything, and we can just do this quickly. So we look at the first claim and the first standard, and sure enough, everybody says, yep, the plaintiff certainly got that. They proved that clearly. There's no question. We bring up the second standard under that claim, and 2 people think that the person proved that standard. Remember, they need 9, and we've got 10 saying he didn't. So we're done, right? 2 minutes in, we can move on, and I am ready to push us forward that way, as are several other people. But I'm in my practice of loving. And so when I looked over to the woman on my right, who was one of those 2 people, I saw the pit in her stomach on her face. And because of my practice of loving, I was brought into empathy with her, and my stomach pitted out too. Here I was, celebrating this experience of brilliant, beautiful community, and I was about to steamroll over it for this woman. Because imagine, friends, if you're in this situation, and they don't need you, they don't need your voice, they don't need your opinion. There's enough people already agreeing against you, so they don't have to listen to you. But it's something that for you is about justice and about truth. And if I had steamrolled over that woman, if any of us had not made room for her to hear it, how easy would it have been at the end of the day to say there was a miscarriage of justice here, and it was because I didn't speak up enough, because I couldn't convince other people, because I wasn't bold enough in who I am to share the truth that I know. How would that have destroyed community for her? How would she have left that experience thinking jury duty was great? No, that would have been awful. And I felt that. I experienced what that would be like. And so I pulled us back, and we took the time to listen. Even though we didn't have to, even though we didn't need her thoughts or her opinions, because we had 10 people when we only needed 4 or 3 even, but we took the time to listen. She shared her views. She shared her concerns. We discussed those. In the end, she did end up agreeing with the majority of us, but we took an additional hour of time on that one claim. And in doing so, we were unanimous on every single standard. We didn't need to be. We didn't need to listen to other people. We had enough. They didn't make a difference. We took that same attitude through the other 2 claims as well and the other 10 standards. And we were unanimous in everything. And at the end, everybody felt like they had done a good job, that they had really participated in this honorable experience of being part of a jury in that community. And afterwards, when the judge came up to speak to us about the case, he said, I would have went exactly the same way you guys did. And by the way, because we were unanimous in our decision, an appeal is less likely. An appeal that would mean these people had more lawyers' fees, more time in court. Another jury was pulled to hear the same argument over again. There were more tax dollars spent in the court. All of that stuff, less likely to happen now because we took that additional time. We were there for 13 hours that day. And it was absolutely worth every second of that day to make sure that everybody felt valued and honored and heard and felt good about their participation. So how can we bring that out of the jury box? Where is there in your life where you're not maybe making room for somebody else's opinion, where you don't feel that you need it? Is it maybe somewhere in your family, either immediate or extended? Maybe it's somewhere in work that you're not really making room for other people. If you're having a hard time finding one, think about any national debate going on in our country right now. And you've got 2 groups of people who don't need to listen to the other group of people, who are loud and content in their own view. And really, friends, regardless of which group you fall into, we're saying the same thing. The group itself is saying the same thing. It's saying, you're an idiot. I can't believe you believe that way. You're destroying our country. And this group is saying, no, you're the idiot. I can't believe you think that way. You're destroying our country. Friends, this is a reciprocal universe. It responds by corresponding, meaning that we get exactly what we give. So it should be no surprise to us, and I know because I've done it. I've been in that group that said, you guys are the idiots, and tried to shame those people into not believing the way they believe because I was too stuck in my own stuff. But that just brings more of it. I put out what I get what I put out. So to the degree that we can go into our lives, whether it's small in our family circles, a bit bigger in our work, or in these national debates, with an intention of saying, I may disagree with you completely, but I love you. Because you're the presence and power of Spirit expressing as you, and you've got these really unique qualities that are just delightful regardless of where our beliefs don't line up. And even in the face of those beliefs, I love you anyway. You may be open to having your mind changed. They may change their mind. Nobody might change their mind. But what will change is the level of love that we have in the experience. Now, again, let's go back here to King and Gandhi. How much hate is present, intentionally or unintentionally, in the way we react in these circumstances? What's the only thing that can get rid of that, friends, is love. How easy is it to despair in the face of such big things when we have such divisive ideology going on? So easy to despair. But remember, throughout history, the ways of truth and love have always won. And I get it. It's easy to think, and many of you may be thinking, Ben, your idea of community that you shared is really great and really beautiful, but come on, man. Me showing up here just being loving and asking what I can do to create it isn't going to change the world or change our society. And all these big things with national debates and everything, if I just show up in my little way loving people, that's not going to change anything. What's the point? I hear you. But again, season of nonviolence. Imagine if Gandhi had listened to the voices who said, dude, the sun never sets on the British Empire. They are so powerful, they control so much of the world. And besides, you're a lawyer, you've got it better than most people, so why don't you just shut up and enjoy your privilege? What if Gandhi had listened to those voices? What if Martin Luther King had listened to the voices who said, they don't understand this nonviolent stuff. They're out there attacking you. You have to attack them back. That's all they understand. So you have to go after them the way they go after you. How would our society be different? But they didn't do that. They showed up to the vision that they had of the way they wanted the world to be. In their loving practice, knowing that love is the only thing that can kick out hate, knowing that love has always triumphed whenever there's despair, they showed up in their loving practice with their vision intact, saying, what's mine to do today to create this vision in the world? And it's easy to say, yeah, but Gandhi had all of India, and King had all of the civil rights movement, but they were once just Gandhi and just King. They weren't always those beautiful, amazing, brilliant leaders who changed the world. They were just people who showed up to a vision and inspired other people in the creation of that vision. We are the change we've been waiting for. Be the change you want to see in the world. Friends, these are beautiful platitudes unless we engage in them, unless we choose to bring our loving practice to that vision that we have and share it with the world, asking what's mine to do today from this place of loving to create this beautiful vision for myself and everybody else? And how can I love everyone around me? It's pretty clear to me from my experience of love in the jury box where my spiritual work is. And I'll be honest, I got a lot of work to do. I've already failed today a couple of times. But it's not about being perfect. It's about doing it to the best of my ability. And a reminder on why you have the authority to do this. In the beginning, there was this infinite presence of love and wisdom. We call it God, we call it the universe, spirit, whatever you want. It's perfectly joyful, perfectly loving, perfectly intelligent, unconditionally loving, in fact, the wisest thing ever. In fact, it is all wisdom, and it created everything, and it looked around at the entirety of creation and said, something's missing. I better manifest as Mary Ann. I better manifest as Ben. I better manifest as George. I better manifest as every single person out there. The truth of who you are is that light, is that love, is that wisdom. If you were not here, the universe would fall apart. The universe is a perfect balance and a perfect harmony. And by evidence of the fact that you are here and it is in perfect harmony, you are integral to that harmony. So from that place, can we love ourselves unconditionally? Can we love everybody else simply because they exist and bring that loving to creating the world that works for all people, a world of love and a world in which, in our darkest times, we bring the person into a circle and spend days loving on them. Friends, the universe knows who you are. Spirit sings your praises. The entire universe conspires for your highest good. And God is so thrilled to call you the beloved. So let's be the beloved together and love the beloved in everybody else as we create this magnificent thing called life. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your love. Namaste.